You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, my name's Anthony Leveritz, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and along with my producer, Jason Cardona, we just had the opportunity to interview Mark McLaughlin. Mark McLaughlin is the founder and owner of Performance Training Center. He's a 28-year strength and conditioning coach, performance training, currently the strength and conditioning coach at Lake Oswego High School, and just a remarkable journey for him. And we had talked about a lot of things, but I think something for parents to hear is the timing of getting your kids involved in physical training, the timing of getting into nutrition, the timing of doing everything involved in that process. And I think you'll get a lot of value out of that. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I know you can choose to do a lot of things with your time, and you got a lot going on in your life. So thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Oh yeah, man, this is awesome. Love it.
Yeah. So when just briefly chatting before the show today, kind of take us through your background. We're gonna dive into all things physical performance and performance training. Maybe dive into some nutrition as we go. But kind of give us your background, how you got to be involved in this. What has sort of this journey been like for you in this field?
Yeah. So I mean, it started off with the oldest of four boys. And so my mom's babysitter was, some rubber boots in the winter, getting us outside.
Did she lock the doors?
Oh, I'm sure she did. I'm sure she did.
I remember, I'll never forget. If I locked my kids out of the house now, they'd probably call Child Services Division.
Right.
But my parents locked me out every day during the summertime.
Right. So, from an early age, we were outside playing. And we were playing football, basketball, 500. Just making up all these games. And so that's where my love of sport and just being outside started. So I give my mom, a huge amount of credit there. And then as I got older, I played the traditional sports, basketball, football, baseball, but like going through junior high and grade school, I wasn't that good, but I just loved to play.
Yeah.
And then, I hit kind of a growth spurt when I was like a freshman, sophomore in high school, and my passion for sport and now my ability to play how I wanted to just kind of went through the roof. So I had a good high school career. I was able to play two sports in college. And then after that ended, I did marathons, I did triathlons, I raced my bike here in the Northwest. So, from that point on, I've just stayed in sports. And when I was about 37, I had a job. I was selling food packaging, but I still kept up to date on what was going on in the local scene. And there was a lot of catastrophic injuries in of all sports, track and field. A girl out of Summit broke her femur in the last 200 meters of a race. There was like 3 cases of anemia out at Sherwood. And all these things that like in the 1980s when I was playing, like we didn't know what an ACL was. We didn't know what a Tommy John was.
Yeah. And
so then that started me on my path of, learning methods, learning practical applications. So I was researching, the former Soviet Union, East Germany, Poland, like all these things. And so then I trained myself for 3 years using all the things that I had learned. And then I thought, I want to try this at the next level. So I volunteered at my high school, LaSalle High School, for 3 years, worked with the football team there. And then after that, I'm like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I quit my job, started my own, training business out of my basement. And then within, first couple months, I had a place in Milwaukee. And then for the next 13 years, I did that, different locations. And then it just kind of got really hard to, make a living out of it.
Yeah.
So then I was offered an opportunity to go to work for Omega Wave, which is HRV technology. I did that for 5 years. So worked with all the major sports leagues, Department of Defense, all the special ops groups, all the big colleges. And that was a great learning experience. And then in 2020 or 21, Coach Steve Corey had contacted me at Lake Oswego High School with the football team because I trained his son Stevie. And that's how I met you.
Yeah.
at LO.
Yeah. Full disclosure, my son is part of the training program that you're
right
that you
right.
developed.
Right. And so you and I talked a couple weeks ago, and here I am.
Well, this is great. So you trained, I think, over 700 professional athletes. Is that correct? Over
700 total, like from professional to high school to college.
What is the common theme, of all of those athletes? We're going to get into the kind of the nitty gritty of kind of the process from being a little kid all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
But what's kind of the common theme you've seen of the ones who end up being great at what they do and how they integrate the physical training component into their to their sports life?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, or one of the biggest things that I see is there's meaning and value to them on what they're doing. So it's not the parent, it's not me as a coach. Like, they have their own reason why they do it, and it's falling in love with the process, trying to master stuff. And so this intrinsic self-motivation drives that. And so for me, I don't even really consider myself a coach per se, and more like someone that builds like learning environments, or like a guide. They just continue to self-motivate.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the biggest thing, because especially when you get to the pro level, it's so hard. Like, how do I keep motivated? How do I keep wanting to learn? All the travel, all the other stuff that goes into it. And so, you have to have your own reason why you want to get up in the morning.
Yeah. It's such a critical point of, parents can introduce kids to stuff, but at some point in time, it's got to become valuable to the athlete if they're going to get the most out of it and continue the process.
Yeah. Because when they're younger, like, it's like, okay, I want to be around Anthony and Kyler because they're friends of mine.
Yeah.
And that goes on for a while. And then, everybody's motivation as they get older, it changes. So the fun of being with your friends when you're younger, when you're, let's say, 15 or 16, the fun may be, okay, this is serious now.
Yeah.
So I think there's different, paths, and everybody kind of hits those stages at different times. And there's a lot of different reasons that motivates kids to, want to do sports.
So let's talk about multi-sport athlete versus specialization at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
A huge topic of conversation in the sports world these days.
Uh-huh.
What is your feeling behind, let's take that age group, kids get involved in kindergarten through, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, all the way through junior high. What is your belief on the value of being a multi-sport athlete as a young person versus just specializing starting as a first grader?
Yes, I think the language here really matters. So, I think forcing kids to try out a sport just for the sake of being a multi-sport athlete is not good, because they may not want to do it. I think putting stuff out there, like if you're laying sticks around, or, what I've done at the school is like, we have high jump standards, and if kids want to try it out, they try it out. So it's kind of in the water per se.
Yeah.
Versus, okay, we have to do, 3 sports. And, at those younger ages, and this is the problem, I think it's all over the world, but, starting kids off at kindergarten or first grade on organized sports is just like, it's a buzzkill. And, parents think, oh, if I start Johnny at, first grade, then his chances of becoming a pro athlete are greater, when actually it's like the polar opposite.
Yeah.
And especially when you get into competition situations where you're keeping score. And in fact, in Norway, they have a Bill of Rights for kids. and they don't keep score until they're 13. It's, for the fun, for the enjoyment, for the community, all that. And then when they're older, because let's face it, kids are going to compete. They're going to know the score, right?
Yeah.
The score is typically for the parent. And so, having these overly, very pressurized situations when they're young, like it just takes the joy out of it.
Yeah.
So, it's, and that's where education comes in. I mean, there's just a lot of factors that go into, because it's a cultural thing too.
Yeah. So someone reaches out to you with a junior high aged athlete that they feel like has a chance to be a great player, right? Or they want to give them an advantage in their high school. What is your methodology with a young person? What should parents be looking for if they don't have the ability to have you around? They're in Boston somewhere right now, or wherever they happen to be listening to this, and they got a young kid. They want to get involved in some physical training to help them with their sports. What should parents be looking for in a gym and a trainer before they turn their kid over to that trainer?
Yeah. So, and that's a great question. So I think number one is, does a trainer have the best interest of the athlete, or is it the best interest for the business? And when I had my training facility, the business model was based on training. It wasn't the training based on business. Yeah. And, as I found out later, and, in a capitalist society, it's, that was,
it makes it harder.
Yeah. It makes it really harder. But that was, I was going to sink on that ship.
Yeah.
And so I think that if they have the best interest of the athlete, they have an understanding of, doing no harm, and that it's a long-term process. And I think the trainer needs to be upfront with the parents, especially at that age, to say, okay, you may want them to be pro or whatever, but, A, does your child want that? And B, it's going to be a long process. And you have to understand that it's a very non-linear projection.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate. I trained 10 or 12 kids that I started with between the ages of 12 to 14, and saw them through up into their 20s. And one of them started with me at 14, and he ended his pro career when he was 24. And so when you see his progression, say on the vertical jump, and how there was these peaks and valleys and all this, it's not this like that.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
And I think you need to be upfront with the parents to say, hey, listen, I'm not making any guarantees. What I can guarantee you is that, I'll do everything I can to make it an enjoyable process and fun for your child.
So when I was a kid, high school in the late 80s, early 90s, and then first started coaching in college in the mid 2000s, or the mid 90s and late early 2000s, everybody still lifted like a football player. It was just heavy lifting all the time. I started in the 8th grade. I got hurt doing it. What is kind of the change in science around lifting versus doing other types of exercises to help the body get strong? And what are some of the other important areas? 2-part question. Well, I'll wait. Why don't you answer that one first, and we'll get back to the second part of the question.
Yeah. So again, especially when we're dealing with young athletes, they're just in this dynamic state, which, I mean, you watch some of these kids within a week, it seems like they've grown 2 inches and put on, 50 pounds. It's a very dynamic process. So, understanding the growth and maturation of these kids, and that, everyone is not going to be progressing at the same rate. And, how much sport are they playing now? Are they traveling a lot? So, at the beginning, it's, how do you move? Can you tumble? Can you do, push-ups? Can you jump? And everybody is going to problem solve in their own unique method. And especially given these environments. And that's why, my view on coaching is that I'm setting up an environment for them to learn. So the environment is a learning tool where I'm guiding them where they're going to make their own, they're going to figure it out how their body figures it out.
Yeah.
On their own.
Yeah.
And that's, self-organization, and that's how they do it. And, the way you jump and the way I jump is going to be totally different.
Both of us probably not very high.
Exactly. Especially now. But everybody's going to solve that problem the same way. And so with strength and conditioning, it's, just going slow, getting them, used to training, getting them used to moving, getting them used to, being on time, like all these other things. And then, the science of it, like the science hasn't changed. It's, I think, what's popular on the internet. And this is where knowledge comes in. Yeah. So knowledge of, what these athletes at certain ages are capable of doing. Peak height velocity, PHV, and your listeners can research it. Kind of goes on, where are kids in their age, as far as height, as far as weight, and as far as sitting height. So then you can tell these sensitive periods of, puberty, prepubescent, all this kind of stuff. And so then at that time, you can figure out, okay, if they're here on this growth chart, PHV, okay, we need to do more speed work or coordination work just because where growth is and all that. And so that's where the knowledge of the trainer comes in of knowing this, knowing how kids are moving, the dynamic things that they're going through. And then, as they get older, then you can start introducing maybe some loading with, weights and things like that and moving it fast. But the greatest tool for agility is tag. The greatest thing for speed is having somebody chase you.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be fancy. Like that's how, like we were playing tag, hot ball, like all these other things when we were younger. But now it's so specialized, and parents and coaches think it has to be specialized when if you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter.
Well, it's going to be my next question. So there's other things in athletics besides strength, right? That are important. Flexibility, your core being able to stabilize yourself, like and some of that strength. But you take a play-based approach, especially with younger kids. Mm-hmm. I've watched some of the things that you do, and I'm fortunate right now to get to be around a little bit while your 8th grade group, incoming freshman group, is training a little bit and getting to see this. Where does this play-based philosophy come from? What do the kids get out of that, as opposed to just walking into a weight room and starting doing front and back squats and bench press and cleans and jerks? Why do you start with that play-based stuff?
So, one of the things, and especially in team sports, is, right now there's a fascination with linear speed. Like, I have to get faster. I have to get faster. And, sprinting is a skill in and of itself. Okay. Team sports, if it was just the fastest guy, like Usain Bolt, like every NFL team would be after him. Right. But his ability to perceive and act within these different environments, he doesn't have that skill.
Right.
And so with play-based, it's very representative of the chaos that's involved in a game.
Yeah.
And that's why, skill acquisition or skill adaptation, like you cannot take the skill out of the game, do these rote repetitions of, have your arm angle here, have this there, because this perfect technique doesn't exist. And then you take that and then you try to put it back into the game. And it's two totally different skills, because the environments, and especially the environment of a team sport, is dynamic.
Yeah.
And so it's more about putting them in these environments where they're interacting with the environment. These affordances that are given by the constraints are making them better decision makers. And so that's why play is such a big part of, what I do. It's really some of the best ways to actually learn skills themselves that you can use in a game. And that's why if you watch a lot of skill coaches now on like internet, it's all, they're all doing against air. There's no rush. There's no crowd. There's no fatigue. There's not a receiver, or there's not a defensive player on the receiver. Nobody's rushing the quarterback. Like, it's not representative of the game at all.
Yeah. So is this something that is pervasive now in training, or is this something that is still fairly rare, what you do, or is this a common theme? And where do people go to find, like, if I'm from somewhere, middle America here, and I'm listening to this, where do I go to find this? How do I get my kid involved? And I'm just speaking as a parent who's seen what it's done for my own child, his athleticism, his strength, without touching a weight. I've seen what it's done for him, and all of the kids that are a part of the program. I think I heard somebody say the other day that you guys haven't had a soft tissue injury in 3 years in a high-level high school football program. So to me, I don't need any more proof than that. Like, to me, that's the proof. While developing high-level football players that are going on and playing college football and high-level success in the state of Oregon, where do you go find this?
Yeah, so my passion is this coaching side of it, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm up in the morning, I'm trying to learn as much as I can, because I don't want to be the best. I just want to be a great learner.
Yeah.
And so, over the years, I've been fortunate to be involved with coaching with really good coaches, but then also the curiosity of trying to make things better for the athlete. And so as far as like all the skill stuff that I was just talking about, so there's something called CLA, which is the constraints-led approach.
Okay.
Where, you constrain the environment to make it as representative as possible for the sport and the athlete. So like, I work with our defensive coordinator, Steve Smith, on all our pursuit drills, all our tackling stuff, all that. And it's all constraints-led. It's all active. It's 2v1, 1v2, 2v2. So it's very representative of the game. And so so there's a couple people that I highly recommend to learn from. So Mark O'Sullivan, who is he works for AIK, which is a Swedish football club, I believe, but then also he's a researcher on skill acquisition for the Norwegian School of Sport. There's another guy, just finished reading his book, Rob Gray. So if you Google like constraints-led approach, you can kind of find that out. And really, I think it's gaining popularity, but it requires you to relearn coaching.
Yeah.
Where it's, okay, I'm going to tell you what skill to do. I think I know the perfect technique. Okay, repeat. Okay, that looks good. Go into the game. You know what? We worked on that for a week. That doesn't look like anything that we did.
Right.
Well, yeah, because it was not representative of what you are put into a game situation.
So that's CLA, constraint-led approach.
Yep.
Okay. So for listeners, if you're wanting to find that's a place to go get some research.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So when do and I, based on what you've already said and what this is not going to be a static answer because everything's dynamic, but when generally should weightlifting get added into a kid's life? And maybe not an age, but somewhere in that cycle for them, but males and females. Like what is and is it different for both men and women, young men, young women, of when weights become weight bearing, lifting weights become part of that process?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at it now, and, I'll take, Kyler as an example. So, he was coming in last year and the year before, and, he would say, hey, I want to lift weights. Yeah, fine. I had taught him, he was safe. It wasn't like we were loading him with, 500 pounds on a squat.
No, but he'd come home and show me his biceps. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my God.
There's not a safe mirror in our house.
Mirrors in the weight room. Yeah. I remember that age. So, I think letting kids explore that is like totally fine. Now when they come into the program and, we have 30 kids in there, with varying levels, I'm trying to start everybody at a common spot. And then as they get deeper, as they, come in, well, even this summer, for example,
Yeah.
like there will be lifting.
Yeah.
There will be, lifting, teaching them, proper etiquette, safety, all that kind of stuff.
But you have incoming freshmen all the way through guys who are going to be seniors that have been part of they're completely different spots in their body composition, where they are in the process, development, puberty, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's not what's going on with the seniors is happening for the freshmen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then also, some seniors or even juniors come into the program and they never trained in a weight room before.
Yeah.
Like they could have incredible skill, right? But they just were never exposed to it. Well, I'm not going to start them where I've had a kid for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, that would just be, not a good thing. So maybe they start, where the incoming freshmen start.
Yeah.
And this is where you get into this, social and cultural aspect of it. Like, okay, well, I'm a great athlete. I don't have to do this. Well, yeah, you do, because I don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah.
We want to do this process right. So, hey, if you have a chance to play college and I'm starting you at a place that's inappropriate, then that's shame on me for being, putting you in those positions.
Yeah, I think there's what your point was really a really good one right there, is that lifting is, yes, can help me get stronger and be better with my performance, but it also, if done correctly, can help me with injury prevention and keep me from getting to the point where I get hurt and I'm not able to play like I want to on whatever nights my team play on Friday nights for football. But there's this injury prevention component to this that helps the body withstand what's coming to them.
Yeah, and that's where variability in training is so crucial, because I think if you look at a lot of the overuse injuries in youth athletes today, it's because they specialize so early.
Yeah.
So, at first or second grade, they're a left winger, and, you go through 5, 6, 7 years of that. They've been a left winger. That's all they do. Well, there's no variability in their environment. And so the chance of injury just goes way up when, all of a sudden, these things change. So that's why we do the gymnastics. That's why we, run on field, turf sometimes. We run on, concrete up the hill. Now we're doing football in the middle of the high school there on the grass field. We have different surfaces inside, whether it be on the gym, the mats and all that. And so that's where these varying degrees of adaptation that you're allowing these kids to explore, it just allows them to be more durable and be able to handle these situations that, maybe kind of sticky and tricky in the games and practice.
I had Alex Brink on the show, and he sings your praises. And one of the big things he talked about was the nutrition change that he made in his life when he was working with you.
Mm-hmm.
When should a kid and a family start thinking about nutrition related to their? Obviously, we should be thinking about it from the moment that our kids are born, but in providing good nutrition to them. But what as a getting ready for training, recovery from training, changing my body, wanting to get leaner or gain weight, whatever that position is for them that they're in. When is an appropriate time to start thinking about that? What do you recommend people go out and do research on to do it correctly?
Yeah. So a really good friend of mine, Landon Evans, so he's the head researcher at Kaiser weightlifting company, but he's also an RD. And so I took a class from him a couple of years ago on nutrition. And, the one thing that stuck out to me with Landon, what he taught me was it's got to be coached. And it's got to be coached often. And so, and I think understanding the context of a student athlete now really kind of, puts things in perspective. So you have kids that are highly, have high stress in school, right? So school day is at 7 or 8, they get out at 3 or 3:30. Like I think LO now, like they don't allow you to eat during school, if I'm correct. So okay, there's a constraint on the kid for getting calories in.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying they don't let them have lunch.
They have lunch, but they can't have food throughout the day.
Yeah.
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 They got to
okay.
sneak it.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah,
a constraint, so there's a constraint right there of, adequate calories, having to get up early, high school kids. I mean, all of us sometimes are notorious with, oh crap, I got 5 minutes to get out the door. I don't grab anything or,
Yeah.
whatever. And then after school, can they get a meal in? Do they want to get a meal in? Do they remember to eat? And so I think when we're talking about nutrition in the context of like a high school athlete, I think there's a lot of things that go into it that can make it, effective. But then it comes down to, the athlete being compliant. And, maybe when they're juniors and seniors, that kind of kicks in because it's a maturity thing.
Yeah.
So I trained an athlete back in 2005, 2006, Owen Marisic. So Owen went to Stanford. Jim Harbaugh called him the best football player he ever coached. He was on the cover of SI. He played for the Browns. Now he's becoming a doctor. And his mom asked me one time, he's going to be a senior, can you talk to Owen about his nutrition? Like, he's just not eating very much or whatever. So my intern at the time was a nutritionist. And so I had him talk to Owen. And then I saw his mom like 2 weeks after that. She's like, he never listened to me, and now he's eating everything. And so that's the other thing about kids that you find is that if you tell them, hey, this is important, which it is, like, yeah, whatever,
Dad. Yeah.
But if someone like myself or, somebody they respect says it, that may be the trigger to, have them now become more conscious of it. So, and I have stuff posted around the weight room as far as pre-workout nutrition and all that. And, maybe 50% of it may read it, maybe 10% of them actually do it.
Where can parents go to find that kind of information out about? Is there readily available stuff on the web for people to go find? Hey, I'm probably just Google student athlete nutrition.
Yeah, pre-workout and post-workout nutrition are always a couple of good things because I think those are the two key areas.
And once a kid buys it, it's just like the strength and conditioning component, right? Once a kid buys into it, does it for themselves and finds the value in it for themselves, they're going to be far more apt to continue that process than if it's forced upon them.
Yeah, because then they're going to do the research, now they may get into it. Again, part of the social media thing, which, I have to deal with every day is, what supplement to take.
That was going to be my next question to you.
Just because there's just a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
Just because, people are trying to sell stuff.
Yeah.
And with high school kids, it's like, okay, the best recovery tool is sleep. So number one. Number two is having good nutrition. Number three is having like a good standardized day where you're waking up at the same time, you're going to bed roughly the same time. You don't have a lot of screen time prior to bed just because the way the blue light, affects the way, our brain kind of works. So, getting those three things down, then you can start, okay, maybe it's creatine, maybe it's a protein powder. But other than that, it's like, if you can't do those first three, all the other stuff doesn't matter. And then also good training.
Yeah.
So
when you say good training, what that mean? A good program that you're a part of on a regular basis?
Yeah, because the training is like the best recovery modality because, you kind of have these ebb and flows of, okay, high intensity, you're coming down for an easy day, maybe a couple easy days. Okay, now you're going up again. That's why I'm constantly asking the kids questions of how do you feel? I watch their body language. How are they moving within a session? How are they interacting with me from a verbal perspective? I test so I have objective testing like vertical jump. Okay, they're down 3 or 4 inches. Okay, well, maybe they're just not recovered. So I need to change the training. So kind of adjusting, having this dynamic, nonlinear approach to the daily training can then also allow them to have an extra recovery day and get more nutrition, and then hopefully come back, better the next day.
So let's saying they've got all the things down, right? They've got the sleep for recovery. They've got a good training program. They've got a good normalized day, and they don't stare at a ton of blue light before they go to bed, right? Supplements. It's a big kids wanting to get more muscle, right? We want to recover, want to get more muscle. What do you recommend for kids, especially in the high school age group? Kids who are in college, their strength and conditioning coaches are taking care of that for them. But in that high school age, kid comes home and says, "Mom, I need some creatine." What's that answer? What is that healthy for them? Is that something you would recommend if they're in the right space, or is it just vary so much that it's hard to get a blanket answer on that?
Yeah, so I'll preface it by saying, like, I'm not a dietitian or a doctor or whatever.
Yeah.
So, when they ask me that about, creatine, so creatine, I think, is probably one of the most researched supplements out there. So, what I tell them is, do the research, talk to your parents about it. And then, make an informed decision on, and I can give them, resources to read there as well. And the same thing with, like, supplementing with, protein powder, do the research. I don't think there's any harm in that. And again, just because, like, the time crunch on meals and everything like that.
Yeah.
And really, like, those are the only two that I would even consider.
Don't give your kids anabolic steroids at 13 years old. You're probably saying that's probably not the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to, what's credible, right? Because if I go do a Google search right now on creatine, there's probably a million posts in Google that you could go through literally to find good or bad for creatine. Who's a credible source in nutrition and strength? Is there any sort of I know the FDA is medicines, but where do we find credible information about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like, as far as the strength and conditioning goes, just because I can talk to that.
Yeah.
So now this is like year 28. And, early on in my career, I kind of figured out, like, who the guys were, who were the reputable scientists, coaches, kind of the research on that. And so as I've gotten older, I've figured out that I can cut through all, like, I know if XYZ coach or researcher says that, I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
I'm going to research it. And, that becomes, trying to tell the everyday person that, for example, like Yuri Verkhoshansky, who developed the depth jumps, like, okay, go research Yuri Verkhoshansky. Well, they're going to, everything that he talks about, like, it's just going to go over their head.
Right.
So I think, man, that's such a good question. And because I'm always trying to think about this, how I talk to parents about some of this stuff.
Maybe that's our homework. We'll come back and tell them on the next show that I'm on. We'll do some homework, and I'll update folks. We'll find some reputable information, because I know it can be overwhelming, right? You're a parent, you've got a kid, and we just talked about the kids' days. Parents got their own shit going on, right? Like, right. we got lives too. And your kid, you want them to have good nutrition, you want to have supplements if it's important. Where do I go to find that in my short period of time that I have to research it, so that I'm not making a mistake, putting them with the wrong trainer, giving them the wrong diet, those kinds of things? Being able to find it, maybe there's a business model for us where you should find but there needs to be a resource there that we can reach out to.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that happens, unfortunately, is that, there's certain coaches that are viewed as the expert. And I think this probably happens in every industry, but, we'll use strength and conditioning and coaching here, is that they may have had a couple great athletes that went through their program that succeeded.
Yeah.
maybe at the highest level. And so outwardly, they are considered the expert. But then when you pull the curtain back and then you see all the ones that didn't make it, the survivorship bias.
Yeah.
There's a great quote that Mark O'Sullivan talks about is, talent is a graveyard of evidence. Nobody sees the dead bodies. And so, this is, why some of these coaches, people may think they're the person to go to, but in reality, they're not.
Yeah.
And that's why I ask so many questions of kids that come from other programs. And speed development is really one of the things. So a good friend of mine, Randy Huntington, there's a resource you can look up. So Randy, he was Mike Powell's coach. Mike Powell, 29 and 4.25 long jump, world record still stands.
Yeah.
He trained Su Bin, who's the fastest Asian sprinter, ran a 9.83, and now he's training Christian McCaffrey.
Oh.
And so, when you listen to Randy talk about speed development, like he knows how to do it in the weight room. He knows how to do it on the track. He knows how to use technology. He knows how to use the art. And so, there's people like that where it's like, oh my God, like, those are the guys that I go to. And then plus in my job at Omega Wave,
I was just going to get to that here in just,
the Jamaican sprinting groups, there was like 2 or 3 of them. So they were a customer. And so you kind of learn how those athletes are training. Then I've had another friend, Hank Krayenhoff. He's a Dutch coach, sprinting coach. So, he one of his guys, Troy Douglas, ran 10 flat when he was 40.
Wow.
So, those are the coaches that I've been around. And so then when I hear what other people do locally, it's like, okay, like that's just not right. And
right.
It's no wonder there's, all these injuries.
Yeah. So you brought up Omega Wave, company that you worked for.
Yeah.
Technology obviously taking over, getting more involved and ingrained into everything that we do.
Yeah.
Young people deeply ingrained into technology.
Sure.
What using tracking devices, from Fitbit all the way now to we got Whoop, we got Omega Wave, you got all sorts of them out there. Do you recommend those? Do you feel like kids buy in more if they have technology to track themselves with that? How do you feel about integrating that technology into young kids' lives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I had my own training facility in 2003, I bought the Omega Wave. I think I was the second or third person in the US to have it. So every athlete that came into my facility, I tested them before training. And then based on those results, then we would change training. So, I may have a schedule of what we wanted to do, but how they tested because of their physiology at rest, like we would change it on the spot. So that's how I learned how to manage the training process, both on a daily basis, and then also, over these longer periods. And, it was a conversation between me and the athlete. Then they came out with a mobile device. So then I started training athletes around the world because they could they could get up. They're in the Netherlands. They test themselves. It comes to my dashboard. I can make the changes or they can make the changes there. Well, now as technology has become more available to the athlete, they want to interpret it themselves. And the thing about any of these devices, and I'll take HRV, for example, if it says you should take a rest day based on your physiology at that timestamp in time, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's where you find out, I don't want to listen to that. I'm just going to train.
Right.
And so then it becomes, because with me, I was like, okay, here are the pros and cons. We may or may not want to do this. This is why. And so we make, these hopefully correct decisions.
Yeah.
But if the athlete's making it on their own, and they're not even taking the advice, it's like, okay, why have it?
Yeah. So it's got to be used correctly.
Yeah, it has to be actionable.
Yeah.
So that's why any technology that I use in the weight room, I use it because I can act on it almost on the spot.
Yeah.
Whether it's the vertical jump testing, we have a couple other test batteries that we use on the jumping. I use bar speed tracker, so we can test bar speed, because when you're developing different types of strength, so reactive strength, maximal strength, explosive strength, like you need the bar to be moving at a particular speed. And if it's not moving at that speed, if it's too slow or even too fast, then you have to adjust the weight to get into that bandwidth. So that's why now it's like the weight really is not as important as how fast you're moving it.
That's fascinating.
Now with the younger kids, it's general work. They're they're lifting, to get strong and all that kind of stuff. But then as they start getting older, it's like, okay, the quality of training now, like we need to maximize it. And here's how we're going to monitor that to make sure that we maximize it. And that's why we got Kaiser strength equipment, 2 or 3 years ago, because it tracks peak power, how many watts we're putting out. I know what elite guys do from my conversations with Randy Huntington. So then I can compare kind of how our guys are moving closer towards this elite level, as far as, moving different, types of exercises.
So I'm going to wind this up here, but at the go back to young people just getting involved.
Yeah.
What's the one piece of advice you would give families thinking about getting their kids involved in sports, physical training?
Yeah.
How to manage that all together? Like, what's that one? Maybe it's more than one piece of advice, but what's your kind of elevator pitch to people about why this is important and what they should be thinking about as they get involved in this?
Yeah. So number one, it's for the kid. So, what are their reasons for doing it? Not what mom and dad want, but what does the kid want?
Mm-hmm.
So, using what the child is saying as a guide. And then from there, and again, this will be our homework assignment, but, trying to get to some, information that, allows you to make, an informed decision.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, man, it's all about enjoyment, the joyous sport for all. And if the kid is happy and he's engaged and there's an aliveness to, where he's at, that's why yesterday, for example, in the weight room, like it was buzzing.
Yeah.
And, I try to explain to people, what our culture's like and everything. And it's like, well, I can't even talk, like you have to be there.
Yeah.
And you've been there.
Yeah.
To see these kids doing all this stuff on their own, like you and I were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's just fun and they want to keep coming back. Yeah. And so that would be my take home message. Like if your kid is coming home smiling every day, checking his biceps in the mirror, I think we're doing something right here.
I think that fun part is so important, right? Like there's got to be some fun to training. And I'm for parents out there that are thinking about getting their kids involved, make sure it doesn't become a job early on. They're going to have jobs later on in life. They have some fun. And what we're doing right now, I think is a great example. We had 35 8th grade football players, and 32 of the 35 have been to a strength and conditioning thing here in the last couple weeks. It's pretty remarkable. And I think it's because of how much fun they have. They don't even realize they're getting stronger and more flexible. They're having a blast working out. They'll find that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah. Well, do this with every guest that comes on the show. I need you to build a reverse crystal ball for yourself. Go back to when you're 14 years old. What advice would you give young Mark McLaughlin today, knowing everything that you know that you've been through? What advice would you give yourself?
Oh man, choose some different parents. I was taller.
Well, that's too late. 14's too late for that.
Man, and I've thought about this, and it's ironic that you even brought this up. So, what would I go back and change? And I have to honestly say that I would not change one thing.
Yeah.
My parents, gave me just a a great opportunity to explore sports. And I think, things happen for a reason. And so, honestly, I would not change or you give myself any advice other than maybe eat some broccoli here and there.
That's good advice. All right. So last thing, do you have a dad joke for me? You do not.
I
Okay.
do not, Anthony.
All right. So this is going to be the first time that we've had to do this. We're going to we're going to my book here.
Okay.
All right, Mark. What do you call a sold out demolition derby?
I have no idea.
A smashing success.
Yeah. Good Lord.
You may not laugh, but that's going to make me laugh. I laugh every single time I read one of these, hear one of them. I absolutely love them. Well, thank you for coming on. How do people find you? Because I know you do some private consulting. You can work with people anywhere based on technology. How do people find you if they want to reach out and potentially have you work with their kid?
Yeah, so my website is ptconline.co. I was too cheap to buy the .com. And then I'm Twitter results_period. And then on Instagram, Mark PTC.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's great content to follow. And I have seen, as a parent in the community that you do a lot of your work in, I've seen the results at the high level. And then as my son has started to be involved in the program from 6th grade, 7th grade, now an 8th grader about to be in high school, kind of the development and the fun that he's had going through that process and how much more of it he wants now because it's fun to him. And people have the time and they want to follow you, they should. If they want more work, they should reach out to you. You do an amazing job. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. If I come back again, I'll work on my dad joke.
A dad joke? And we got to come up with it. We're going to come up, and I promise in one of the shows coming up, we'll sit down and I'll look up some sites and see if you think they're credible, and we can provide that information to people. I know parents, it's a chore. Well, it's fun to raise kids. It's hard to raise kids, and doing the right thing is super important and getting the right information.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can provide that to people.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Anthony Leverett's back here, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and just finished up my conversation with Mark McLaughlin. 28 years in the training profession. He's kind of seen it all, and we covered a whole bunch of topics. And I promise you, when off air, we were having a conversation about getting some credible resources for parents to look up and explore on your own when looking for the right kind of information. And I will update you on a future show on that as quickly as possible. One of the things that Mark and I talked about today that really resonated with me personally and was making sure that you get your kids to buy in and not pushing them to buy in, but letting them lead into that buy-in. And I think that goes for anything, like whatever sport they're playing. If the parent is pushing them into that, there's a chance for burnout and resentment and not wanting to do. And that is certainly not what we're trying to do as parents as we're introducing sport to our kids. And I have my own personal story. I'll never forget. I hated lifting. I hated it. I still, to this day, it's not my favorite thing in the world to do, but I knew it was important I didn't even know it was important. My coaches made me do it. And so, I'm lifting and I'm sore all the time. And we're in a summer league game between my freshman and sophomore year. And I go get a rebound against this guy named Craig Stinnett, Sutherland High School. He's 6'9", ended up playing in college, and I'm still a young buck. And I go up and get a rebound that I would not have gotten, at least in my mind, if I hadn't put that time into the weight room. I felt my strength starting to change. And for me, that's when, even though I didn't love doing it, I loved what it did for me. So getting that, and no one ever had to tell me to go again. I was just there. And from that point on, it was just part of my process, not a process that my coaches or other people were trying to make me do. And I think if we can remember that this is the kids' experience, we want them to do it, but we got to figure out ways to introduce it to them, that they have fun, that they buy into it, make it a game, make it be fun. I think you'll have a ton more buy-in from your kids. We really enjoyed the conversation. Please follow us on all of our socials. We're out there on Next Pitch Media. You can find us on all the platforms, and hopefully you'll listen, rate us, follow us, give us a review, and tell your friends about the show if you find value in this. And until next time, have a great day.